Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Now we're looking at the positive content of her ethics. She's putting forth a kind of ideal. The rational egoist should behave in certain ways and should not behave in other ways, and there's going to be a requirement of consistency. One of the things that this is connected with that we're not going to get into in detail is what she calls these virtues, and she doesn't mean by them exactly what virtue ethicists mean by virtues. She calls these acts. She doesn't call them habits. She sees them as somewhat like commitments. But there are things like rationality, integrity, justice. And so think of these as sort of good character traits. It's not just about what you do in the particular instance. It's about what you do over time, the kind of character, the kind of person that you develop yourself into. Interestingly, she talks about like one of these virtues actually being, she's got the word moral ambitiousness. Being sort of eager to make something of yourself, to make yourself into a better person. Now, what counts as being a better person for Rand? Well, if you boil it down, if you want to get down to the really simplest, you could say there's three different sets of responses, and you can see this in the two chapters that I've given you from this, the one about the Objectivist Ethics and then the lifeboat ethics stuff. She says that, let's put it this way, three responses to people. To those who actually have virtue, what sort of response should that provoke? So to people who actually have, character traits, who act in this way, who have commitments to being just, to having integrity, to, being productive, to not, relying on other people for their livelihood, for thinking things through on their own, for making reason the sole criteria by which they do things. That's what she calls rationality. What would the appropriate response be to value them? And it's interesting, she says you value those kinds of people not from an altruistic kind of way, where you're saying that person is good in and of themselves and therefore I must take care of them or love them or treat them well or invite them over to the house on Saturday night or pick whatever concrete thing you want. Give them a call every so often. Write a letter of recommendation for them. She sees that as being selfish, as being properly selfish. If I recognize integrity in you, and I want to hang out with you because of that, I'm enjoying his integrity. I'm getting something out of it. If he doesn't have that, I wouldn't want him to hang out with me, is how Rand sees it. Towards everybody else, let's just say ordinary people who are not particularly well developed, she says that we owe a certain amount of respect. But what that respect means is that person does not matter particularly for me. I might help them out if they need it, but I'm not required to go seek out opportunities for helping them. As a matter of fact, letting them actually figure out things for themselves is what might make them eventually virtuous which then might lead me to love or become friends with or esteem them. All I really ought to do is not mess with them. And if I feel like helping them out, then I can do so. If I see a drowning child, floating by in the river, of course, I'm not going to say, well, I don't know about the virtues of this child, so I think I'll just, respect them and let them float on by. She doesn't say that, but she says, well, you should evaluate the situation based on what you're actually going to get out of it and what the goods are. The defenseless child, probably, you have a greater obligation to them in that situation, not all the time, but in that situation, than somebody who's an Olympic swimmer who just conked their head, and is a little bit dazed, or the grown adult with the inner tube who's saying, help, help, The defenseless child is a little bit different. But even then, it's going to be based on your own, sense of values and what you're getting out of it. If you're putting your life at risk, she says it should be for a good reason. So respect might actually not extend that far in a lot of cases. Then for people who are aggressors, or people who are frauds or parasites, what do you owe them? Not only do you owe them nothing, but you're entitled to use force against them to defend yourself, to defend your interests, to defend yourself as a rational being, as a ground of values. Now, she's got some really interesting discussions in there about how we choose the kind of people that we do and why we value them the way we do. She says, the proper manner of judging when or whether one should help another person is by reference to one's own rational self-interest and one's own hierarchy of values. If I have to choose between helping my friend who's a philosophy colleague and helping somebody who is in the music industry, I'm probably going to help my philosophy colleague because I rate philosophy a little bit higher than music. Like music a lot, but there's a lot more people doing great stuff in music that don't need that much help, and not as many people in philosophy. If you ask me, to choose between helping my own kid and helping 10 other kids, Rand would say you help your own kid. Because you actually value your own kid. Your kid focuses higher in your hierarchy of values. She says, the time, money, or effort one gives to the risk one takes should be proportionate to the value of the person in relation to one's own happiness. My kids matter to my happiness. My wife matters to my happiness. Somebody else's wife, not quite so much. Unless maybe they're my friend or, my friend's wife, and I care about how he's affected, so I better help his wife with X, Y, Z. Same thing could apply to students, By Rand's logic, I should be treating two of the students that have taken classes with me previously better than all the rest of the class because I've already formed a connection with them that I'm just sort of forming over the course of time, reading your papers and those sorts of things with them. So maybe actually that can lead to some unfairness. Rand would say, no problem with that, actually. How does that strike the rest of you? Sound fair? Unfair? Sounds unfair to me, actually, so that might be a problem. But then, if I actually value fairness, that's in my hierarchy of values. Right? If I think fairness matters, that's something that I can choose to make matter. Conscience, you brought that up earlier. If I want to listen to conscience as a guide, I'm the one who's choosing to put it up here. If I say, I can't do this for this person over here because that would violate my conscience, I'm saying conscience rates higher than pleasing this person who I might get something from. Now, she goes on and she talks about, she says, love and friendship are profoundly personal, selfish values. Love is an expression and assertion of self-esteem, a response to one's own values in the person of the other. We love what we find in the other person because we value that. And for Rand's ethics, this would be something where it really differs from a lot of religious ethics, there is no obligation to love people. to esteem them. It's something that you choose to do on the basis of seeing something in them. So the whole notion of like loving somebody despite their flaws, very alien to Rand, unless you're getting something out of that person. She says, what should you grant to strangers? Goodwill, respect. And she goes on, she's got this very nice discussion about how do you know if somebody's actually living up to their values with respect to this. This is where integrity comes in as a virtue. She says, if a man is able to swim and save his drowning wife, but becomes panicky, gives in to an unjustified, irrational fear, lets her drown, then spends his life in loneliness and misery. Let me pause there for a second. How would you treat somebody like that? What would be the response to that? They could have saved her. He could have saved her. But he froze up and she drowned. Let's say it's your friend or your relative. Yeah.
I think like while you feel a little bit bad for him because he was suffering, he kind of did it to himself, so you wouldn't really feel too sympathy.
Yeah. You'd feel less sympathy than if like he had exerted everything and he almost died himself. What do you think, the rest of you? Agree with that, or? Yeah.
I don't feel bad. I mean, like, he just like froze up because he was scared.
Yeah.
And some people are just like that, so it's not like entirely his fault.
Yeah. What do you?
Yeah, I kind of agree.
Okay.
A little bit of both of them. Like, it'd be unreasonable to not consider the kind of stress that comes with being shocked in a situation like that, but at the same time, like,
You let her drown.
yeah, you let a person drown. So.
Yeah.
I would be like, man up.
That's pretty much what Rand says. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would feel bad, but in the sense that I would kind of like lose a little bit of respect, like feel bad because we like.
Yeah. Then this is what Rand actually said. Go ahead. I'll do one more. And then.
By him like withdrawing though and like reacting the way that he did, he's wasting 2 lives, you know, and so like.
Oh, that's interesting.
Really should man up.
Her life and his life.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be exactly the sort of thing she's saying. She says, you would condemn him morally for his treason to himself and his own values. That is, his failure to fight for the preservation of a value crucial to his own happiness. His wife is necessary for his happiness, and yet he doesn't go all the way to fight for that. And he says, or she says, since one's own happiness is the moral purpose of life, the man who fails to achieve it because of his own default is morally guilty. She says this is a lack of integrity. The virtue involved in helping those one loves is integrity, loyalty to one's own convictions and values. It's the policy of sticking to what your values actually are. I think there is a sort of a moral ambivalence here, the feeling, well, it is too bad that happened, but why did you let this happen? Those would both come into play because there's a contradiction there within his actions, isn't there? If I claim that, let's say I'm the guy and I say my wife is absolutely necessary for my happiness, I can't possibly imagine life without her, I'd better save her because otherwise I'm not really living up to what I say. That's integrity. And that's sort of at the core of what Rand is talking about. She has one virtue that she thinks is most primary, that's rationality. But integrity also seems to be particularly important when it comes to personal relationships. This sort of thing over here. So the other thing that she talks about is this notion of the traitor. Not traitor, like, betraying something, but trader, trading things back and forth. Her ideal is the person who neither gives nor takes what is undeserved or unearned. So everything that I ought to expect from you, I ought to earn in one way or another. Everything that I give to you ought to be what you actually deserve. And if the relationship is set up like that, then everything is completely fair and rational. This is where justice would come in, the virtue of justice, as well as some other ones. So somebody who's not productive really can't claim to expect much from others, Rand would say. If you don't work, you shouldn't eat. use another Pauline quote, right, is sort of the basis of this. But if we want to be looked at as good people, if we want to be valued by other people, we have to actually give them some reason to value us. We have to, according to Rand, develop these good character traits that make us worthy of something more than just mere goodwill and respect, friendship, love, admiration, all those sorts of things. That's what the trader can do. And I forget who brought up the problem, competition, yeah, of one of the problems with egoism that a lot of people bring up is that it's inevitably going to bring us into competition and we'll have conflict with each other. According to Rand, if everybody acts as a rational egoist, then we're not going to have conflict. We'll be able to work out, if you and I want the same thing, we'll sit down and we'll actually talk it out and figure out how we can share in it, or maybe you get it on Saturdays and I get it on Sundays and he gets it on Wednesdays, and so on down the line. It's only when rationality fails that conflict becomes inevitable for somebody like Rand.